A lot of companies sort of get it a bit wrong where they say, I need to raise money so I can finish my prototype. Now, that's a very hard proposition for investors because they want to see traction.
A lot of people think they're doing R&D when they're not actually doing R&D. Before you go for that, it's really important to actually ascertain, are you really doing R&D? And, that can be quite nuanced as well.
You would start with whether they are currently deploying. So whether they're actually investing from the fund, because they might be taking meetings and they're currently raising money for their own fund as opposed to deploy. Having founder friends is very important because you're all dealing with exactly the same shit. It doesn't matter about your technology. The journey is the same for everyone.
Welcome to The Business Game, a podcast that moves the needle. Hey guys, before we jump into today's episode, we just wanted to take a really quick moment to thank one of our sponsors, Tala Offshore. For any businesses wanting to maximize their return on new hires, Tala offers seamless access to top-tier Filipino talent who are real employees hand-selected by the Tala team, slashing your staffing costs by up to 60% with onboarding in under a week. Visit talaoffshore.com to scale smarter, and thanks again to Tala for supporting The Business Game. Alrighty, welcome to today's episode. My name's Jazmyn. I'm joined with my co-host Dan, and we're excited to bring to you today one familiar face and a brand new one. David and Audun, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for being here today.
Yeah, thanks, guys.
So I'll get you guys to just give a really brief summary of who you are and what you do.
You kick it off, David.
Okay. Hi guys, I'm Dave from Bitpool. I'm the CEO of Bitpool. Bitpool's a cloud-based platform that connects with property data to generate insights from properties all around the world.
Awesome. And I'm Audun. I'm a program lead at an organization called EnergyLab, which exists purely to help climate tech founders launch and scale their startups. EnergyLab's been around for close to a decade, and we run a number of different programs from sort of early stage ideation all the way through to going international. And I'm looking after the Queensland Investment Ready program.
Fantastic. So, David, you joined us a little while ago, and there's a bit of a fascinating story about what happened after you appeared on the show. Do you want to walk us through kind of the really vulnerable parts of, what unfolded after that episode?
Yeah, so I think, look, the last time I came on, had a great podcast with Jamie, and we were talking everything property technology, and as a startup, one of the things that you get faced with is essentially your go-to-market strategy, and for us as a company, we had really struggled with that. We were struggling to scale just based on the classic business model that we were using, which was around our direct-to-customer approach. At the same time, we had our then CEO leave the company. And at exactly that same point in time, we had two accelerator programs that we were part of. One was EnergyLabs, and the other one was the Advanced Queensland Ignite Scale program. And that's where I first got introduced to Audun, who has been a legend ever since then. And, from that point, it's just been an amazing journey where we've pivoted the company. We went from a local-based Brisbane company to now having partners all around the world and scaling in I think it was about 6 months ago I did the podcast with Jamie. So, yeah, it's been an amazing journey, and we're definitely running at warp speed at the moment.
That's great to hear. And what about this from your perspective, Audun? Could you sort of share from your perspective how David came into your world?
Yeah, I think it was last minute, and it was quite a sort of serendipitous thing that happened. That I was speaking as part of a panel at an event in Brisbane at the precinct called "Are You Really Ready to Raise?" It was put on by Taurus Capital, which is Queensland VC and sort of fundraising platform, and I'd been picked to be one of four panelists, I believe, and just talking about investment readiness. And after the panel discussion, three guys came and approached me and said, "What is it really that you do?" And that was Dave and also Anthony and a third person from Bitpool, and we started talking about the investment ready program. And we started talking a little bit more about Bitpool, realizing there was only about a week until the program was about to launch. We had locked in our cohort of 10. And then then I said, you guys, you got traction. You know what you're doing. Let's do a really quick onboard and get you part of what was then cohort number 2. So in record time from randomly meeting to being part of cohort 2 was only a matter of days or about a week. It was meant to be, I think, Dave.
yeah, it was. It definitely was.
Yeah, that's wonderful. What synergy. So can you talk to us about QIC's role in all of this?
Yeah, so there's something called the VCDF, Venture Capital Development Fund. Now, this is a Queensland government initiative that is managed by QIC. So the money comes from Treasury, but QIC, Queensland Investment Corporation, has been appointed to manage this VCDF. Now, the VCDF is about $130 million going into the startup ecosystem in Queensland. And I think it's meant to be over 4 years, and we're about a year and a bit into this deployment of the VC and DF. So the idea is to make Queensland not only a sunshine state, but also a startup state, and really putting money into that ecosystem. The vast majority of that money is going into VC funds. So let's say roughly 15 or so VCs from around Australia have applied to get a small part of that overall bounty. And then another part of the money goes into accelerator type programs. So there was originally 5, that EnergyLab was one of the original 5. I think now we might be up to 7 or 8, but they've picked different type of accelerator providers in health tech, in ag tech, in climate, and some more sort of generalist sector agnostic programs. And then they're sponsoring the programs or paying for the programs to be run so that they can be offered for free to Queensland-based startups. So on paper, this is a really good idea because it's leveraging existing program providers that know their shit. It's leveraging existing VCs that are experts in different sectors, as opposed to the government trying to do it themselves. If the government was to run the programs, do the investment, it's an impossible task. So they're basically outsourcing the program and the investment side. So it's early days, but on paper, this looks like a really good idea, and it's getting some attention around the country. And other state governments are going, this seems like a very good way of doing it. So yeah, we're about a year into this 4-year VCDF plan.
I was just going to comment on that too, Audun, because it's interesting when you come from our side, you look at someone like Queensland Investment Corporation, you think they're this massive corporate entity, how are they going to work with us? Our introduction to Audun was actually through Nicola at QIC, and I did want to give Nicola and Nick a shout out because I think just as human beings, they're just such lovely people who their primary goal is to see companies succeed in Queensland. I mean, they just literally want you to win, and they do just about everything around them to help you get there. And that's how we were first introduced, to River City Labs, and fate would have it that we met Audun as well. So it is an interesting take on those big corporates that there's a real human element behind what's driving that VCDF, in my view.
Yeah, 100%. And let me also add to that, Dave, that QIC as a whole manages about $100 billion in assets all around the world, but that includes infrastructure, real estate, and so on. The VCDF it sort of sits under the PE, the private equity part of QIC. They're managing this VCDF, and to second what Dave said, Nicola and the team at QIC are doing a brilliant job of nurturing this ecosystem, bringing us all together on a regular basis, bringing together people running the programs and the investors to sort of to work together. And the whole idea is that we need to foster or nurture the startup so that they are more likely to be invested in by these funds that have been allocated.
No worries. So, David, how has the program specifically helped Bitpool?
It's helped us in a lot of ways, and it's interesting when you start your journey on this because, and it'll be interesting for Audun to hear this because I think sometimes maybe we're detached from like how much impact a program like EnergyLabs can have. But the program was called, it is called, are you investment ready? But there's byproducts of that for your business that happens by virtue of doing the program, which aren't investment related. So the first thing I would say is when you're pushing hard and you're innovating and you're trying to scale rapidly, you're working in the business 24/7. And when you go and, even interact or participate in some of the events, or even in the program, you get this opportunity to work on the business, not in the business. So you get this very different perspective. You've gone from the pressure cooker to coming outside the pressure cooker, and now you get a different perspective on your business. What the EnergyLabs program did for us was two things. Asked us a fundamental question, are we actually ready for investment? But by virtue of asking those questions, it actually helped us change things within our business that weren't right, especially around our go-to-market and scalability. So, from a program perspective, I think, a lot of people may look at it and say, okay, is this just for me if I'm ready for investment? But just going through the program can actually fundamentally change the way your business operates as well.
Fantastic. And can I just be diving a little bit more with that? What did you have to change at Bitpool to make it investment ready?
Look, there's, funnily enough, a lot of things. It was mainly around our scalability, to be honest. And what it showed us was for us to be attractive enough for someone to want to invest, we had to have scale. And the way we were going to market through a direct customer channel versus a partner channel wouldn't enable us to do that globally. And that was, that's our mission is to be a global company. So it's a pretty fundamental thing. Now, sometimes you can just sort of get stuck in your ways and get in your own way as well. It's not until you've really challenged difficultly on what you're doing that you sort of have that light bulb moment. When we had the light bulb moment, it was funny. I was actually in the middle of the Ignite scale, and Anthony was doing some of the early stages of EnergyLabs. And we both came back and we're sort of both exchanging information, and we were going back and forth. We said, this just isn't going to work. And I remember that moment where we were like right in the middle of something. We'd had a breakout session. We're like, this just isn't going to work. We need to change it. And we did. And I mean, we did that aggressively as well. And we were pivoting that model whilst we were going through these programs. And what happens when you do that, you go from this very uncomfortable setting to a very comfortable setting, even though you're under extreme pressure. Everything becomes easier, and then you're actually able to absorb more and more information, and it just feels like things get easier and easier and easier as you're going along. But yeah, does that answer the question? Hopefully I answered that question clearly enough.
Yeah, for sure.
Absolutely.
Definitely.
It's that difference between, I think that initial phase where you're starting a company can feel quite lonely, and I think it's that extension into a community that really seems to make the difference.
Absolutely. And I'd say too, when you go through the program, you actually see other people who are in similar circumstances to yourselves. One of the key values, Audun is always lovely. He always takes my call, and I call him, just here and there for really important things. But I think Audun may not understand how important that actually is in the moment. So you get these moments where you just think, I just need to get this opinion. And EnergyLabs are always approachable. They're there for you. It's a fraternity, right? It's you're there for life. Those moments and those calls are just so important, I think. And I think of other startups in Queensland needing those moments themselves. And, massive shout out to Audun and the team. It's been amazing.
Fantastic.
Nice. I wouldn't mind actually, for context, just lay out roughly what the program is for the listener to sort of understand.
Yeah,
we keep referring to the program, but it's a 3-month program. It's all online. We do some social stuff where we're in the same room, but all the sessions are online. And basically what we do is it's 10 weeks, say on average 2 sessions per week. So 2 Zoom calls, if you like, per week, but 10 weeks of content. And for this particular program, it's all cap raise related. So every single session is about some sort of angle to do with fundraising, which is different to many accelerator programs that do customer discovery and things like that. All of that aside, we're assuming if you're doing an investment ready program, you already have done those sort of things in the past. So it's all cap raise related. So we do 10 weeks of, and people realizing that there's a lot more to this than I realized. Like if you're going to be a successful founder, building product is one thing and building revenue, but cap raising is a whole new skill set that you should have in your toolbox. So without going into too much detail, we talk about different types of funding. We talk about the mathematics behind running a successful VC fund, so you understand what's on the other side of the table. We talk about how to do investor outreach, data room, how to talk about the opportunity, how to pitch, how to close the deal, how to manage your cap table, all of those sort of things. So 10 weeks of content, and then we go into 2 weeks of investor meetings. So throughout the process, we sort of pitch all the startups to our investor network, and then we do 2 weeks of VC meetings, and then we celebrate with the showcase, like a pitch night at the end. So when we keep referring to the program, that's in short what the program is.
David, what would you say stands out as EnergyLabs being different from other programs that you've accessed in the past?
For me, I couldn't, with everything that was going on, I couldn't attend every session, but the content was there. So for me, I would, sit in on the ones that I could, the ones that I couldn't, just reading the content and then having that access to Audun. So one of the things that stood out for me with the program is if you're out there and you're thinking, hey, I'm in the pressure cooker, I just don't have time for this, you really do. And also, you should go to every session that you can, but it's not like if you have an important meeting, you can miss it. I think that flexibility is really important because I know there'd be a lot of people out there thinking, I just don't have the time or I can't make the time. The EnergyLabs program is very flexible in my view. And then once again, it's actually not just the program. It's everything that comes on from that as well. It's that community aspect to it. It's, I'd like to think I talk to Audun a little bit more frequently, but if in a year's time I called him, I'm sure he'd pick up the phone and take the call and remember me and help. I think that's a really important thing because it is a real, it's a real incubator for Queensland tech startups. And that's different to just running a program, going through it, and then never speaking to the people again.
And let me add to that. I think what the particular program we're referring to has a real focus because everyone in the room, all the startups, are working on some sort of climate-related technology. So everyone is sort of roughly in the same space. Also, every single speaker, every session has a different speaker. So I've sourced speakers from the Australian ecosystem. Most of them are climate investors. So they obviously know what investment ready means because they're the ones deploying the money. So it gives us, not only are we talking about cap raising, but everyone in the room on the receiving end and everyone that delivers a session are all climate adjacent. So that gives it a real unique focus as opposed to doing a more generalist program where you've got a dating app and some sort of defense cake all in the same. So I think that is unique about the program, that it's got a real sector and topic focus.
Yeah, I'd love to be a fly on the wall for that. I can imagine those conversations get really interesting.
And one thing we also did is we make a point out of not recording the sessions because then the speakers will be worried about, saying something they shouldn't be saying or being, they don't have to worry about getting clipped and put on LinkedIn. So we're trying to aim for something where it's like a no bullshit attitude. You're hearing it exactly as it is. They're not talking to a camera. I desperately try and take notes along the way so that I can share with the cohort. But the idea is that it's a sort of free space where we can get the real truth from the investors. Nothing's polished, so that's an aim of the tone of the program.
How incredible!
That's great. Yeah, if you're leading a startup, you don't know what you don't know, and if you can leverage off the knowledge of people around you, fantastic. That's going to help you take the next step. But do you find that the different startups within the incubator, do they collaborate sometimes?
Yeah, that does happen. Whether they directly collaborate is one thing, but more about, I know someone who you should be talking to who's good at this. So, they might not be actually like working on a solution together, but the sort of having found a friends is very important because you're all dealing with exactly the same shit. It doesn't matter what your technology, the journey is the same for everyone. So I think it's more like getting access to each other's networks is very important. I don't know, Dave, if you've got an example of something like that where you collided with others in the program. I'm not sure.
Well, we sort of just make friends. It's interesting at all the different events we still see the same people. It's hard because I don't remember all of the names, but it's like you're just constantly seeing the same people at different events, and it's really the networking and drinks after is where the war stories come out and everyone's sort of going through those same challenges. So it's the community aspect for me. And it's, I suppose, once again, it's that you're not working in you're outside working on the business, not in the business. It's that breakaway as well, and getting amongst other companies and listening to those challenges, which is good from a networking perspective. I think some of the technologies that you see, EnergyLab did a very good job at getting an excellent cohort on too. I mean, we had, carbon capture technologies to, forest replantation technology type things. And then there was us in the built environment. There was just such a broad spectrum of climate tech in that cohort. It was actually really interesting to be a part of as well.
So we're speaking obviously about venture capital today, but I want to know your opinion. Bootstrapping versus seeking capital. What advice can you sort of give to startup founders? What sort of real world examples can you give of, one situation where it may be more suitable than another?
Bootstrap as long as you can. Do as much as you can with as little money as you can for as long as you can. There's no better money to get your hands on than revenue. And you should only take VC or institutional investor money if you think that throwing a big chunk of money at your model can help you hyperscale or grow really fast. So, if the benefit of taking external money is that you can really ramp up your growth. But if you don't think that pouring rocket fuel on your model will result in growth, then it might not be right for you. Also, a lot of companies sort of get it a bit wrong where they say, I need to raise money so I can finish my prototype. Now, that's a very hard proposition for investors because they want to see traction. So typically, a lot of people might go into the racing game too soon. Bitpool's got a lot of traction, so that's a different story. But I hear time and time again people going, I just need to raise some money so I can finish my prototype. And I'm saying you're probably getting that back to front. When you're dealing with VCs, they're gambling with or placing bets with other people's money, so they need to see a fair bit of traction. If you're dealing with what we call business angels or family offices, they might go in earlier because they're playing with their own money, so they don't have a mandate to follow. So it's also about being smart in terms of who you approach, depending on where you are in your journey.
That's great. I'm learning something there. Sorry, David. So, what's your thoughts on that?
My view. I've always said, just philosophically, you can have too much money. There's something really nice about not having quite enough. It keeps you hungry, it keeps you under pressure, and you find new and innovative ways to do things, and it sort of forces you into that pressure cooker. On the investment side too, I look, this is from Bitpool's perspective, it's also key. They talk about, getting capital in to pour rocket fuel on your business model. I think it's really important too to understand from an investor, not just from a capital perspective, but what strategic benefit they bring to the company. What sort of network do they have? What sort of expertise do they have? And then at the end of all of that, I always like to say too, is when we're successful, you want to look around the table and go, I'm happy we won with these people. So they've got to be great human beings as well. And I think if you get all of that right, then you'll have a really good fit. But I definitely agree with Audun. You've got to bootstrap as long as you can for a whole heap of different reasons. It's not just about, it's about that keep staying in the pressure cooker, keep staying keen, keeping hungry, that sort of approach. But there is a point in time where for your model to scale, you will need to seek investment. And at that point in time, I think don't just go for the capital, think about who they are as people, that strategic impact and what they stand for. And you'll do really well.
An investor relationship lasts longer than most marriages, so you need to make sure that you choose the right one, and you do that by doing reverse due diligence, by asking questions of the investor as opposed to just the investor asking questions of you. You should also, in your investor meetings, have a range of questions that you ask them to understand their fund, where they are in that fund, what sort of experience they have in your field. So you need to really also vet the investors so that you get in bed with the right one.
Yeah, what would you say are some great pointed questions that people could be asking to their potential future investors?
I think that's a real interesting topic. You would start with whether they are currently deploying, so whether they're actually investing from the fund, because they might be taking meetings and they're currently raising money for their own fund as opposed to deploying. Typically, a VC fund is about 10 years. They want to have an exit in 10 years. And they typically only deploy, say, in the first 3 to 4 years. So you want to also find out where in that cycle they are. If they're in year 7 and they have a little bit of money left that they're trying to deploy, they would want a very quick exit, which is going to put a lot of pressure on you. If they're year 1 or 2, that's what you want. So where in the fund they are. You would ask, when was the last time you invested in a similar company to ours, to see if they've ever been in your sector. Ask them about where they see your sector going, so you get a gauge for whether they understand the space. Then you ask sort of hygiene factors about your average check size, whether they lead rounds, whether they do follow-on rounds, those sort of things to do with actual transaction. And then you should also ask them about their timeline and processes. So where does it go from the sort of discussions you're having? If they're interested, what does it look like, the process from initial interest to potential money in the bank? And it's a long process. Even once you've got someone on the hook, you're dealing with term sheets and the nitty-gritty of the legal DD, which can take a long time.
That's so valuable.
So, David, do you have some lessons that you've learnt with funding with Bitpool?
Yeah, I mean, we had so our seed funding came from existing shareholders, and we'd always sort of raised capital from what you would call friends and family. So we'd never had that experience of going to someone new and asking for money. We sort of took all those lessons learned from EnergyLabs, but for me as a person, I always like to get, I like the fundamentals more so than capital. So it was always about, are you hands-on in a business? Like, will you roll your sleeves up and get hands-on and help us? What's the strategic value that you could bring to Bitpool before we would talk about capital? That might go against some of the rules that Audun said, but it was really important for me when talking to potential investors is like, can I actually have a human relationship with these people? Could we work together? Can they bring value to the company? More so before we talk about capital. And I think that's a really important mix. I will keep pressing on that. I think you can't underestimate the value that an investor can bring plus capital, not just, what's the check size that they're writing.
Yeah.
Well, I imagine that some people just be looking for the money and like, yep, we'll do it ourselves. Just give us the money. We'll give you the return. But I think majority would be like you, David, where they're looking for some type of inputs and how to grow and how to scale and get good advice and try to avoid the problems.
Yeah, and it's also, you want to have that relationship where you can, they can come in and you can have those strategic conversations, because that's another thing. Like, you will never solve every problem on your own. You need to bring in different ideas and different thinking, and that's what you should be looking in that investor as well. As it's almost like, what don't we have that we need in the business, and then drive to that.
Yeah. I wanted to circle back a little bit and just play devil's advocate for a second. You sort of both phrased it as, funding should be looked at, like large funding from venture capital firms should be looked at when you're ready to pour rocket fuel on something. I feel like there's probably like an abnormal percentage of people, or a inappropriate percentage of founders who all believe that, sure, pouring more money on this, of course, would make it grow. What's the nuance to that?
Okay, so ideally, you should have found what's called product market fit, meaning customers are seeking you out. You got your model right. So, you're a startup whilst you're still trying to figure out your model. Once you've got your model, then you're ready to scale and become a scale up, and you scale up by pouring money on it. So really delighting your customers, almost feeling like they're coming to you. That's a good sign that you've got product market fit. Every startup thinks they have it, most don't. And once you get to product market fit, you're sweet. Most startups fail. So most startups never get there. So that's a good sign. Like if you feel like sales are coming quite naturally, and that's a good sign that you're on to something. But you also need to be a company that can scale. And a lot of companies think that, or startups think that they are sort of ready for VC when they're not. There needs to be something that scales, obviously, something that scales through technology. And ideally, you also have a true and tested sort of go-to-market. Ideal scenario, you know what your CAC is, your customer acquisition costs. You might even start to know what your lifetime value of a customer is, and then then you got to go to market that works. That's when you could pour rocket fuel on the model.
Yeah, perfect. Hey guys, just wanted to do a quick shout out to our affiliate partner, OpusClip. If you need great video edits without hiring an editor, their AI engine turns your raw clips into share-ready content in under a minute, no skill required. Find our link in the description to support our show and get a great sign-up bonus. Create more, stress less with OpusClip.
A little bit more to that. What are some common pitfalls that you've seen with startups recently? And do you have any examples?
Let me share some of the common pitfalls. Typically, you make a lot of the same mistakes. So one thing is to launch into the cap raise before you prepped your data room. And I've made that mistake in the past. You're so eager, you got your pitch deck ready, and you just start hitting up investors. That's a terrible mistake. 95% of a cap raise is in the preparation. So building out your data room with different folders, financial, product, legal, go to market, etc. That is the bulk of a cap raise, is to do all of that, get all of that ready. Then there's this idea of ideally you should get investors on the same timeline. Meaning, if you are kicking ass, you'll get multiple term sheets. The only chance you're going to have to be able to compare those term sheets is if they arrive roughly at the same time. So then you got to work backwards. If the term sheets are going to arrive at the same time, that means you should open your data room for all investors at the same time, so that you have a few weeks of access to the data room and questions. That means you should be pitching to investors roughly at the same time. So in an ideal scenario, if you're highly sought after startup, get all your ducks in order with your data room. Reach out to the right investors. That's the number one mistake that the startups do, that they just start hitting up VCs that they've heard of in the paper on LinkedIn. They have a specific sector focus and a specific stage focus. There's a great open source list that Airtree puts out, one of the big VCs in Australia. So you need to target the right investors by sector and stage. Have a hit list of 30 or so, something like that you want to talk to. Set up, say a month of pitches. Have your data room open at a certain date, and maybe even say that you're going to close it at this date. That will give you a chance to, have multiple term sheets arrive roughly at the same time, so that you can in the best position to negotiate those. So talking to the wrong investors, not being prepared. Also not being able to articulate that there's a clear line of sight to a market that is large or growing. And also a lot of early stage startups might go to investors only as a lone scientist. That is also very difficult to pull off. Lack of commercialization experience in the team is a big red flag from the investor side.
Have you ever come across startups that simply cannot scale up, or they can't monetize it, like they can't make it to the next level?
Yeah, the vast majority.
Yeah.
So,
okay.
So something that is service-based, something that requires a person to be in the room with one client to deliver whatever it is that they're doing, that doesn't scale. So, something that involves, care or giving, advice one-to-one, those sort of things, they don't scale, because you can only be in one place at any one time, unless you then obviously try to digitize some of this. So anything that requires that sort of is in lockstep with needing more humans to be able to scale. That is not an easy thing to raise. So it needs to be something that scales through technology. Software obviously scales very quickly. Hardware, which a lot of climate tech is a little bit different. But yeah, it needs to scale through technology and not be dependent on service given by humans.
Right. How do you have that conversation with a startup founder that it's not going to happen?
It's for them, well, just to say that you should not be pursuing VC if this is the type of company you are. And people think that VC is this sort of glamorous thing that everyone should shoot for. It's perfectly fine to have a small, medium-sized business. That's awesome. And the VCs call them lifestyle businesses, and it's almost like they sort of feel like they're putting it down. How awesome if you got a small business. There's nothing wrong with that. But to not chase VC unless you have a really scalable model is good to keep in mind. And there's others you can, pursue, maybe other investors that are following more a value sort of approach. So you might have, you mentioned friends and family, but there could be angels that are particularly interested in what you're doing that are willing to support you. But if if you're looking for institutional VC money, it needs to be scalable.
No worries. So what type of percentages do you say are unsuccessful and taken to the next level with what you've seen anyway?
Oh, 9 out of 10 startups fail within the first year if they even launch. So you just got to realize that is the game. And there's some investors that don't even want to meet with you unless you got a couple of failures behind you because you build scar tissue. So you got to realize that failure is just an opportunity to start again more informed. And if you are worried about failing, then you're probably not pushing the boat out far enough. So just realize that if your first startup succeeds, then you're breaking all the odds. So failure is fine, and that's just part of the entrepreneurship or startup game.
I was just going to add something to Audun's comments there, because I think the other thing is you have to have an extremely open mind to change. A lot of people get stuck in their ways, and then once you understand that change, you have to take massive leaps of faith to pivot. If you are going to pivot, and pivot can be an awkward or bad word sometimes, so you don't want to be pivoting all of the time. But when you see something that is not right, often people are like Audun was just mentioning, afraid of failure, afraid to take that leap. That's another thing that I think causes a lot of companies to fail, is just not being able to have the confidence to go all in once you know you're on the right pathway.
Do you think that there would be either an imbalance in how many, with the stats on how many startups fail, is there an imbalance on how many good ideas there are, or is it just simply a case of people just really need to go through those lessons before they're ready to execute?
So ideas, it sounds harsh, but ideas are worthless. It's all about the execution. So you can have the idea is not worth anything unless you got a team that can execute. So ideas are a dime a dozen, and people are trying to don't want to share what I've got an idea. I can't tell you, and you need to sign an NDA. No one gives a shit about your idea. It's about you execute, and that requires team and experience. So there's a million ideas, million great ideas probably that never gets built, because it's all about the execution and the building that thing, turning that thing into a product.
Even from a product perspective, though, too, I mean, you can have an amazing product, but a shit go to market or poor market or product market fit, and you're still going to fail. That's the other thing you see. I think there was a company, was it General Magic? The mobile device. There's a really cool documentary out there called General Magic. You watch it, as like the very first smartphone that never made it, and it was like just amazing technology at the time. They had this like super cool device, but it completely failed because of the business and the timing.
I wondered if it might be slightly different when you're in the room, though, with all of these really passionate, ambitious people who are working on environmental solves in particular. There must be sort of this social element to it where, you're really hoping for everyone's success because they're obviously sort of trying to contribute something really positive to the world.
Yeah, and being in the room with all the founders, realizing that you're dealing with the same challenges, but getting some first believers. Like, being a founder is super lonely. You're going to hear no most of the time. It comes with the benefits of sort of being your own boss and that sort of stuff. But it's hard. That's why very few people succeed at it. So being around other founders, there's some sort of commonalities then, because you're all crazy enough to have a go, right? Most people never plunge into the startup world. So being around other people, realizing that you're dealing with similar challenges, getting some first believers, that's really, really valuable.
So David, just with your baby, Bitpool, how did you take on criticism?
Like really badly at the start.
Yeah,
like
I can imagine.
It's like
I got these ideas of great businesses, and imagine someone telling me, "Nah, you're doing it wrong," or "You got to do it this way," and you just get, I don't know.
You realise that everything's perspective. Like Audun was saying, you get used to hearing no a lot. There's certain things that you do have to hold your ground on. And believe in it yourself. I mean, we were very early adopters of artificial intelligence, and we got a lot of kickback around that at the time. And that was just something that myself and the team sort of very fundamentally believed that it would be the future of technology. But there's other things that you do have to be open-minded to. And it is actually, I I'd say it's a journey, and it's like a maturing as you get older. Like, definitely when I was very younger, I used to this, any sort of criticism as like, I gotta take it personally, like, why are you against me, all of this. But now you just sort of take it as context. And the more of that, actually, the more criticism you get is actually good in some ways, because it tells you where you are in the journey. So, criticism can be looked at like from a negative, but I actually look at it from a very positive, because like, I want people to be challenging what we're doing all the time. And if we've got people challenging us all the time and we either prove them wrong or we learn from it, then that's great for us as a company. And I think that's really important for Bitpool to succeed, is you actually need that criticism constantly. Part of the pivot that we did, I never would have thought we would have gone down the pathway that we did. We were probably more so stuck in our ways with this traditional business model. And if we wouldn't have had an open mind to that criticism, or at least the highlighting of where this potential issue was, then we would have never changed, and we potentially could have failed.
So can you talk us through what that pivot actually has been? So we know from your past episode a lot about Bitpool in its former form. Could you talk us through what the future is looking like now?
Yeah, for sure. So like we always went direct to the customer. So the building owner, the property portfolio managers, we would go directly to them as a customer and sell our product to them to use, because they are inevitably the end user of the product. That environment's very challenging to work in. It comes with long sales cycles. There's like a lot of barriers to entry to actually, establishing a relationship with that potential customer and getting your product implemented into the portfolio. We had come from a background of building automation, which essentially building automation providers purchase product from a manufacturer and implement it into those customers' buildings. And once again, logically, you look at it and you go, why didn't you guys think of that to start with? It seems so ridiculous. But so our model changed to selling Bitpool to building automation providers, mechanical service providers, or energy performance contractors, where they take our product, they sell it to their customers. And if you think of the scale of that, I mean, each one of those providers may have 200 to 500 customers themselves, but it also gave us the ability to sell globally and sell to partners all around the world. That then changes the focus of our company, because the focus of our company now is, product development, training partners, onboarding partners, and supporting partners versus all of the effort that we would do with direct to customer. Now, we still do some direct to customer supply, but it's not our primary driver. Our primary driver is to drive through partner channel and add value to other service providers' businesses rather than just that direct customer.
Sounds like quite a boom in the potential for expansion. And I was just thinking to myself that, if your first approach had have just worked well enough for you to be able to coast along on it, you might not have ever kind of tapped into this global market in the way that you currently are looking to. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, we from a partner perspective, to give you some context of the scale, we started that process probably about 4 months ago, and we're signing anywhere from around about 5 partners a week, which when you start to look at that kind of scale, it's quite remarkable, and once again global reach as well. So we've got 2 partners in the UK that we're working with, and now we're starting to work on expanding that globally. But it just gives you that ability to simply scale out. And until you're in that circumstance where you don't get that light bulb moment that sort of happens, it's really hard to explain how much of a grind the other business model was to our new business model. It's like life just becomes a lot easier. Yeah.
And that's what I was going to touch on. How did you find the transition from talking to end users to talking to partnerships and building partnerships?
Well, I come from a technical background, so and so does actually fundamentally, probably 70% of our team are highly technical. So it even makes more sense for us to deal with the partners. That's what's so stupid about some of the problem is it was so logical in the end. We really like talking to end users. I mean, you need to have, and this is sort of the balance that we have to strike very well. You want to have direct end user customers to get that direct connectivity between your product and the end user. but equally you have to have a channel that can get that into those end users' hands. So we actually still like both. It is really enjoyable talking to partners because you do get to talk more technically. It's definitely more of a technical capability sales pitch versus, for an end user customer, it's a little bit different. But I'd still say the conversations are equally just as great. It's just a little bit of a different dynamic with the partner.
And how did EnergyLab help you with that, with the communication style?
To be honest, EnergyLab didn't specifically help us with that, and not to be too blunt to Audun here, but they didn't help us with that. Going through the investment ready program sort of highlighted, if you think about it, like the inverse. I always like to look at the inverse of the problem. So, like, why aren't we ready? And then when you start to go, why aren't we ready, or why aren't we scalable, then you start to solve those problems. And that's really what EnergyLabs did. But the other part, they took us out of working in the business on the daily grind. It was that disconnect out, allowing us to sort of see that and, indirectly just sort of probably challenging our business model a lot. And like I said, we didn't just go away from it and go, okay, it's sort of a binary thing. It was more just a rapid transition to something different. But that's why I make a really clear point on that is, if you're looking at the program, it's not just, it is investment ready, but you will get a lot more than just being ready for investment out of the program, in my view.
Yeah, that's awesome. I was wondering if we could go through this next lot of questions with just some really practical hands-on tips for people who are looking to step into that next phase of their startup. So starting with how do you suggest to people that they actually access accelerator programs like EnergyLab?
So trying to figure out what's out there. I really encourage people to get involved with their local startup community, whatever that is, whether it's startup drinks or, like a morning walk or whatever it might be. Figuring out what's out there. There's so many different accelerator programs. So thinking about which one is right for you. So if you're very early, then maybe you should do one that focuses really on customer discovery and validating the idea. If you're more advanced, or next step for Bitpool now maybe might be to look at like one that's focused on international expansion, things like that. So educating yourself of what's out there, actively trying to become part of the local startup ecosystem. It's so much happening on a sort of like a grassroots level now, whether it's in Queensland or in other state, and just start, asking questions, finding other founders and making a concerted effort to become part of the ecosystem. Obviously lives online as well. You can find out a lot by following, investors and other startups and people that have a voice on LinkedIn, things like that, but actively sort of going after becoming part of the startup scene and educating yourself on the different options that are out there to find the program that is right for you.
Yeah, perfect. And what about accessing government organizations that might be useful?
So government, there's so many grants out there that are available. So, there would be pages, websites where you can find those. Grants are awesome for early stage. If you need to build out a prototype and so on, that is where the grants really live and do an excellent job. Yes, there are grants. Yes, there are government accelerator type programs, and you'll find that with a quick search online. Like the Queensland ones are easy to find. Etc. So I think grants play a really important role early stage.
David, did you use any grants?
No, we were funded through, so no, we didn't use any grants, anything to that effect. Some of the like R&D tax incentives and things to that effect are good if managed well. That's the other balance you need to strike with those things is like actually, you need to actually manage that process really well and document it really well. So for us, it was, chasing revenue, as we said at the start through bootstrapping is like, it's in our view, the right way to go.
Yeah, I think that's something that people also maybe don't realize is how much of a workload it can become committing to not just grants, but investors as well. It adds a layer of complexity.
And how about building a network around you? Accountants, lawyers, other tech startups? I mean, obviously we touched on that with the incubators sort of thing. But Have you had any issues finding good relationships, David?
No, from our side, no. I mean, we obviously have a very extensive network through the property industry, and so no, we hadn't found any challenges to that effect. I think, from an investment perspective, definitely we had challenges, prior to meeting with QIC and being introduced into this ecosystem. When you haven't walked that investment pathway, it's definitely really important that you get people who have different capabilities and be able to provide different advice. So from that perspective, being introduced to that community has been excellent because it's opened that right up for us. But, the day-to-day, what I call like the business of doing business, no, we always had pretty good support there. But once again, it's for especially early stage startups, are they overly worried about legal, or are they just trying to grind and get the product out there? Once again, coming through to that startup community, that's where you can actually meet people and get good advice.
No worries.
And important, I would say, to any young or first-time founders is a lawyer is not the same as another lawyer that specializes in startup stuff. So just because your auntie is an accountant or a lawyer doesn't mean that you should be using her for your startup work. So I would spend some time thinking about who are the financial people, the lawyers, and et cetera, that are focusing on startups. So to get advice from someone who knows what they're talking about, who's not just a big enterprise lawyer or accountant that also does some startup stuff on the side. There are definitely people now that are specifically focusing on the early stages, and you'll save yourself a lot of headaches when it comes to cap table management, financial advice, all of that sort of stuff.
I was just going to mention on that, I mean, a lot of people think they're doing R&D when they're not actually doing R&D. Before you go for that, it's really important to actually ascertain, are you really doing R&D? And, that can be quite nuanced as well. So, even in some instances where you really do think you're doing R&D, it potentially cannot be R&D. So, yeah, definitely important to get advice on that.
Right. We are running out of time. So I'm just one last question for both of you. What's your advice on showing up ready, being intentional, and making the most of every connection?
Okay, I'll kick this off. I'll slightly reframe it, and I would say my number one takeaway or my number one advice to any early stage or first time founders is to think a lot about why now and why you. So to think about what is it about the problem that makes this the right time for this problem to be solved, and what is it about you that makes you right for pulling this off, all about the execution. So when I say why now, I'm talking about macro trends, what's happening with technology. Obviously, Dave mentioned AI, other headwinds or tailwinds. So why now? Why is this a right time for this solution? And why are you the right team to execute? And then getting really good at storytelling. If you're going to convince people to work with you, if you're going to convince customers to buy from you, if you're going to convince investors to invest in you, it's all about telling a clear and concise and compelling story about why now and why you.
And David, do you have anything to mirror that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, generally in life, you should follow all of those points. I mean, you should always be intentional with everything that you do. I mean, from an investment standpoint, one of the key things in the EnergyLab program is know the investor. I think you really should spend time understanding that, not just from a point of attracting capital, but understanding, is this someone I want to work with as well? Do they share the same values that we do as a company? Is really important. But that was the most important lesson from the EnergyLabs program I took, was actually understanding the investor, understanding what success looks like to them, and what they're passionate about as well.
Yeah, that's really valuable. I think this has been such an incredible hour of so much insight, and I'm sure it's going to be extremely valuable for founders who are looking for information on whether to keep bootstrapping or whether to jump into that next stage.
Now, to finish off, can I ask for a summary of yourself and the business or the program that you're in, and starting off with David?
Okay. I'm David Blanch. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Bitpool. I love technology. I've been in the technology industry for 23 years. Bitpool's a product that connects data from the built environment, brings it to the cloud, where we use artificial intelligence to generate deep operational insights. And for anyone who's looking to change the way their property is managed, reach out to us on www.bitpool.com or jump out to us on LinkedIn.
And I'm Audun Fiskerud from EnergyLab. I'm one of several program leads. EnergyLab is an organization that helps climate tech founders launch and scale their startups. A good starting point would be to go on to energylab.org.au to get an intro to the different programs. Also, if you'd like to connect with me personally, just hit me up on LinkedIn. I'm really passionate about startups and securing investment. So even if you're not part of the program and you've got something you want to run past me, I'm always just a quick message away.
Amazing. Well, thank you both so much for your time today, and I'm sure we'll speak again.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thanks, guys.
To help support our continued mission to provide free, best-in-class advice from the world's most compelling business leaders, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss an episode. See you on Saturday. Thanks for tuning in to The Business Game. If you like what you've heard, make sure to subscribe on YouTube and follow us on TikTok, Instagram, Facebook, and LinkedIn to stay connected. A big thank you to our major sponsor, Tala, for powering today's episode. Join us again on the next episode of The Business Game, a podcast that moves the needle.